Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a nice evening. And I want to have a welcome to our virtual attendees who are joining us for today's session, which are being live streamed. I have one reminder before I introduce our keynote speaker, and that all outgoing and incoming board, nominating committee, and governors need to attend the installation rehearsal at 12:15 in Hall 3. So 12:15, Hall 3, we're going to try and do it quickly because we only have an hour for the lunch. So please, if you could be prompt, we can then leave promptly. So thank you. Before we introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to invite Jane to the stage to provide another credentials report. As Jane is coming to the podium, I ask all delegates to locate your voting devices. Actually, you don't have to vote. Your voting devices to have them ready to vote after the presentation of the credentials report.
Good morning. I hope everyone had a nice evening. Please turn to page 50 in your convention booklet for the Credentials Committee report form. You may wish to use this form to fill in the numbers as they give them. Are you ready for the numbers? As of Tuesday, the 28th of June, at 8:15 a.m., the numbers of the voting members are as follows. While there are no changes in the voting numbers, I will provide them for your convenience. International Board, 11. That's 1-1. Past international presidents, 6. Governors, 30-3-0. Delegate votes and proxy votes carried by delegates, 1,243. That's 1,243. The total votes are 1,290 or 1,290. I will repeat those and then I will proceed to give the final totals for credentials. Currently, today's date as voting members are International Board 1-1. Past international presidents 6. Governors 30-3-0. Delegate votes and proxy votes carried by delegates 1,244. That's 1,243. Total votes are 1,290. That's 1,290. Now I'll proceed with the final credentials report. Total number of clubs in Zonta International is 1,120. That's 1,120. Clubs represented by delegates are 511 or 511. Clubs represented by proxy are 484. That's 484. Clubs not represented 125. That's 125. I'll repeat those final credentials reports. The total number of clubs in Zonta International are 1,120. That's 1,120. Clubs represented by delegates 511. That's 511. Clubs represented by proxy, that's 484. That's 484. Clubs not represented 125. That's 125. Madam President, that concludes the credentials report.
Thank you. Since there is no change to our credentials report, We do not need to approve the credentials report. We approved it yesterday and we have no changes.
Madam President, may I go ahead and present the final attendance report on behalf of the registration
Yes,
chairman,
please.
Alice Chick?
Please.
Thank you. I'm Alice Chick. The final attendance report, International Board, that's 12 or 1, 2. Past international presidents are 6 plus 3 virtual. Governors, 30, that's 30 plus 2 virtual. Other members registered are 1,311, that's 1311. Virtual member attendees are 526 or 526. Virtual members plus 1 day attendees are 183. That's 183. Guests registered are 122. That's 122. And the total is 2,195 or 2195. I will repeat that again. International Board, 12, that's 1, 2. Past international presidents are 6 plus 3 virtual. Governors are 30 plus 2 virtual. Other members registered 1,311. That's 1311. Virtual member attendees 526 or 526. Virtual members plus 1 day attendees 183. That's 183, 183. Guests registered 122 or 122. The total attendance is 2,195 or 2195. Madam President, that concludes the registration report on behalf of Alice Chick, the chairman.
Thank you, Jane, for both the credentials report and the registration report. Thank you. Zonta International has been supporting efforts to end child marriage since 2014. And today, we are proud to be the first and only private sector and woman-led donor to the global program to end child marriage. In 2021, Zonta International was recognized for its efforts to end child marriage with the 2021 Power of a Summit Award. Zonta was one of only 6 associations to receive the award. The American Society of Association Executives' highest honor for the association community. Please watch the short video, which was played at the award ceremony in Washington, D.C. last September.
In 2018, Zonta International embarked on a multi-country initiative to bring an end to child marriage. Joining UNICEF and UNFPA in the Global Programme to End Child Marriage, Zonta has distinguished itself as the first private sector donor to the global program, contributing $3.5 million so far. Through advocacy campaigns, partnership building, and community engagement, Zonta has brought unprecedented attention to this issue. Results of Phase 1 are impressive. Of 12 target countries, 11 now have child marriage action plans. Nearly 8 million girls have received a vital life skills education, and a PSA campaign in the U.S. has helped secure 2 new bills banning childhood marriage, with strong bills pending in 12 states. For their contribution to advancing the rights of women and girls worldwide, ASAE is honored to recognize Zonta International with the 2021 Power of A Summit Award.
Thank you to our headquarters staff and team for submitting the nomination on behalf of Zonta International. And to all of you who have supported our efforts to end child marriage at the international, national, and local level. As the world has grappled with COVID-19 over the last 2 years, we know that more girls were put at risk of child marriage. To introduce our keynote speaker to speak more about the issue on child marriage globally, please welcome Zonta International United Nations Committee Chairman, Pamela Morgan.
Good morning, and thank you, President Sharon. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today our keynote speaker, Nankali Maksud. Nankali Maksud is a senior advisor focusing on the prevention of harmful practices, female genital mutilation, and child marriage for UNICEF Headquarters Program Division. She has over 20 years of experience in managing child protection programs in Eastern and Southern Africa with UNICEF. As a child's rights advocate, she has been involved in advocacy that led to the improved protection of children affected by HIV and AIDS and other vulnerable children. Nankali has played a leading role in coordinating UNICEF's engagement with governments and other partners and the development of programs for the protection and care of vulnerable children in countries in Eastern and Southern Africa. She is a national of Tanzania and holds a Master's of Arts degree in International Law from the United Kingdom. Please join me in welcoming Nankali Maksud.
Good morning, everyone. Such a wonderful pleasure to be here today. I was talking to a colleague of mine and saying that I've been 5 years now on this job. And during the 5 years, I've had such wonderful opportunities to be able to engage with Zonta, on all different aspects of child marriage. So thank you so much for the continued partnership. And thank you so much for all the contribution that you're doing towards child marriage globally. So this morning, I have the honor of doing a presentation together with Sahada, whom you'll soon meet. She's a young girl who's based in northern Ghana. She comes from a program that's a recipient of the Global Programme. And so we have the honor of jointly doing a presentation this morning. Now, on this particular presentation, I'm going to be talking about child marriage in general. I won't be talking about the Global Programme. I'll be back a bit later to talk about the Global Programme. So an overview of the impact of child marriage globally. The first thing that I'd like to say is, again, I had the pleasure of joining a reception yesterday evening to talk about and met some people who were a lady who was forming a committee on climate change. And we had a really interesting exchange. So before I get into my presentation, I just wanted to say that as I prepared this presentation and the data that I'll share from this presentation does not take into account what we're now calling the triple crisis globally. 3 things that have been happening over the past 2 years, some of them over the past 2 years, and some even longer. Specifically, I'm talking about 1, climate change, 2, COVID, and 3, conflict. These 3 things have been interplaying to make adolescent girls, women, and all communities throughout the world even more vulnerable than they've ever been before. And so as we go forward, as we move towards achieving the 2030 goal that we all planned as a global community to eliminate child marriage, the world, I'd like to share, is becoming an even harder place. And so the relevance and importance of engaging on issues related to child marriage are becoming even more important. So a snapshot on child marriage around the world. Some of you may have already seen these figures, but it's always good to be able to remind ourselves. Today, as we sit here, 650 million girls and women alive today globally were married before their 18th birthday. 650 million. I think sometimes as we put those figures out, it's easy to kind of keep rolling them out, and especially for somebody like me who keeps doing these type of presentations. But it's important to think that behind that are lives of young girls, lives of women globally who have been impacted significantly by child marriage. 12 million of these girls become child brides every year. Again, let me highlight that this figure that we have of 12 million girls becoming child brides each year is an estimation that we had before we started to talk about the impact of COVID, before we talk about the impact of climate change, and before we talk about the impact of conflict. So those three things are also interplaying. So the number is probably even much higher. So this is an underestimate. About 1 in 5 young women globally were married in childhood. And 6 times more child marriage, is a result of gender inequality, making girls specifically affected by the practice. Now, one thing I'd like to be able to highlight, and it's some part of the analysis that we've been doing in UNICEF, is that boys also are affected by child marriage. Indeed, girls are much more affected, disproportionately affected, but boys, are also affected. Girls are 6 times more affected, but as we think about what we need to be able to do about this issue globally, and if we are proponents in addressing child marriage, and if we are advocates of gender equality, we need to take into account that boys are also affected. So what's behind the 650 million number that we're always kind of taunting around? Indeed, girls and women, are behind that, and it happened before their 18th birthday. But what this slide does for us is to show us that this is really a global issue. There is no continent, there is no region globally that is not affected by the issue of child marriage. Of course, there are some regions that are even more affected than others. And because of that, we need to be able to possibly pay more attention to those. But what's clear is that it's a global issue. I hope that everybody's able to pick that up from this slide. South Asia continues to be a huge, contributor towards these issues of child marriage. And so for the global program and for many other programs that are working, at a global level on issues to do with child marriage, there's a lot of concentration on that. East and Southern Africa, West and Central Africa, you'll see that we've highlighted there that nearly 1 in 5 of the world's child brides are found in sub-Saharan Africa. I'll come back to this a bit more, but there's a reason why we're really starting to highlight the issue of child marriage within Africa. You will also see East Asians and the Pacific there. You'll see Latin America, Eastern European, and many other regions all equally affected. Now, sub-Saharan Africa, we're really kind of bringing this to the fore and wanting to make sure that people who are working in child marriage, take this into account and consider. And why do we think it's important as we go forward? What these dots are showing us is that because of the population increase that is expected within Africa as we go forward, and as is right now, we expected that we will have an increase in terms of child brides in Africa. And so this will be increasingly become an area of concern. You will see that South Asia, even though at the moment carries one of the, the hugest burden in terms of child brides, will increasingly go down and will be replaced by Eastern and Southern Africa and West and Central Africa. And so as we think forward about where we want to invest, where the issue is particularly important, Africa is increasingly coming more and more to the fore. When we look at how, these different regions have responded over the past 30 years, we'll see that in general, child marriage has declined around the world, though only modestly in some regions. But one thing that I do want to make sure that people take away from this slide is that child marriage has declined. So the great work that all of us are doing, including Zonta International, is making a contribution globally. Yes, we continue to be challenged, but the efforts that we're doing are paying off. And they're paying off perhaps a bit more in some regions than others. If you look, for example, at the South Asia bar, I hope that's clear to all, you can see a steep decline. South Asia is doing a really good job. And we need to know what is it that South Asia is doing and how can we be able to learn that for others, especially if our target is to get to 0. When we look at West and Central Africa and East and Southern Africa, you can see that the lines are almost kind of horizontal. So making progress indeed, but not as fast as required. So what else is it that we need to be able to do to make that curve as sharp as it is for South Asia. Unfortunately, when we look at the bar that's linked to Latin America and Caribbean, you can see that it's almost horizontal. What does that say to us? In the space of 30 years, we've had almost no change in Latin America and the Caribbean. That's a terrible situation and something that we really need to be able to address as we go forward. So the numbers are not as high in Latin America and the Caribbean, but whatever those numbers are, there's been no change in 30 years, and that's a cause of concern. If we look across all the regions, again reminding us that our target is to be able to get to zero, you'll see that no region is on track in terms of eliminating child marriage by 2030. You can see the Western Central Africa going from 40 to 37. In general, there are declines. East and Southern Africa moving from 34 to 27. South Asia, of course, moving from 30 to 17 and carrying on to make progress. And then look at that Latin America, 25 to 25, still not much progress. So this is us kind of looking forward. So in general, for all stakeholders, for all partners, a lot more still needs to be done in terms of the effort that's being done to respond to child marriage. Then we had COVID coming in. And what we know from COVID, and UNICEF received, and released this data 2 years ago now. So in addition to the 650 million girls, 10 million more girls, became vulnerable to child marriage as the result of the COVID impact. So going back to my original comment at the beginning of the presentation is that the situation is getting even worse. And one of the things that's contributing towards the situation getting worse is COVID-19. Why is it making the situation worse? First, interrupted education. We know that at least 11 million girls are at risk of never returning back to school. Schools were closed, and of these 11 million, there is a risk that they will never go back to school. We know that the longer that girls are out of school, the less chance of them going back into school. When girls are at home, it's very likely, especially in poor households, that their families would redirect them towards care options, towards marriage, so they become extremely negative. We know that there's also been economic shocks. So 117 million children were estimated to have been pushed into monetary poverty in 2020 due to the pandemic. And then we know that there's also been disruption of programs and services. So those programs that we had out there that were either preventing girls from falling into child marriage or supporting girls to get out of those marriages was significantly disrupted during this period of time. And that then will impact on the numbers of child brides that we will have globally. So as I said, I'll be doing this presentation together with Sahada. Sahada Abubakar is 16 and from northern region of Ghana. I thought that we've had lots of opportunities for myself to be able to present. And wouldn't it be nice today to also be able to hear from one of the girls who's been a recipient of the program? So kindly allow me to welcome Sahada onto the presentation. Sahada, you there?
Yes.
Excellent. So Sahada, I'm going to ask you to adjust your camera so that we can see your beautiful face. Can you hear me, Sahada?
Yes.
So we can only see the top of your face and we'd love to see you. So Sumin, can you adjust the camera so that we can see Sahada? Thank you so much for making time to be able to join with us, Sahada. To the Zonta colleagues, Sahada is joining us from Ghana, and I'm really glad to be able to do this presentation together with her. So Sahada, I've already been mentioning, your name, but we talked in preparation for this presentation. I'd love for you to come in and, share your full name, share your age, and share where you're from.
Okay. My name is Abubakar Sahada. I come from Ketejeli Northern, and I am 16 years of age.
Excellent, Sahada. Tell us about your family.
Okay. The head of my family is Mr. Muhammad Abubakari. He has a wife called Mrs. Habiba. He has 7 children. 6 of us are female. The 7th one is a male. I am very happy. I am very hopeful that I find myself in this lovely family.
Excellent. Tell us about your family yourself.
My friends, I am the type who like friends who always tell me the truth, be with me when I am in sadness, always like my matter, and I like their matter. Friends who always tell me the truth when I'm doing bad things.
Excellent. Has COVID impacted on young people in your community?
Yes,
Can you share how?
how COVID has impacted our community is, we all know that COVID is a deadly disease that has come in March 2020. It has really affected us in our education. During the lockdown, all the school were closed, so it has really affected us, we the young girls in the community. We were sent to come back in our houses, sit down. Some of the ladies went to seamstressing. Some of them were also doing hair making. Some were not having anything to do, and our parents could not give us all what we want when we were seated in the house. Especially how to feed us was very, very difficult for them. But when we were going to school, feeding us was not difficult because when we are out of the house, we don't trouble them a lot. So when the lockdown has come, we all were seated in the house doing nothing. Some went to seamstressing, others went to hair making. So that has caused us the teenage pregnancy and the child marriage, which I have also experienced that.
Thank you so much, Sahada. Tell us about your school.
Okay, the name of my school is Ketejeli English and Arabic.
Excellent. And how long have you been at this school?
I have been in my school for 9 years now. Even when I was pregnant, I was still going.
Thank you very much. What are your favorite subjects?
My favorite subjects are English, basic design and technology, science, and social studies.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, Sahada, is somebody who's working through what we call the PASS project, which is supported through the Global Programme. Sahada, maybe you can tell us about the PASS project.
Okay, PASS means promoting adolescent safe space. It is being implemented by an NGO called NOSAC. The objective of the project is to reduce the rate of teenage pregnancy in Ghana. We were given the privilege, it deals with young ladies 10 to 14, 15 to 19 years old. We were given the privilege to select our mentors to be mentoring us. These mentors are specially trained how to mentor us. As part of the PASS project, we had the staff of Ketejeli Health Center who come to visit us every month to take us through the reproductive health, education, and rights, such as adolescent health, puberty, the changes that occur in adult girl or boy, the contraceptives, and the contraceptive, few I can mention, but more.
Thank you so much, Sahada. Final question. What would you like to be when you grow up?
I would like to be a nurse.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sahada. Thank you. That's Sahada's baby. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 a.m. in Ghana. Sahada's made the time to go to the local UNICEF office with the baby to be able to be with us this morning. Let's clap for her. We appreciate you, Sahada. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm almost done. So what is it that we're doing in the context of the global program, or what are people doing, not only within the context of global program, to be able to support girls like Sahada? 5 key strategies. The first is to create and expand opportunities for the empowerment of adolescent girls. More and more, we're seeing adolescent girls who are empowered, who are being supported, with programs so they can speak up themselves, so that to the extent possible, they can be able to make decisions about what it is that happens within their lives. So Sahada is a perfect example of a girl who's going to a program that's supporting girls to be able to make those kind of decisions, to have the necessary information, within their lives. We're also promoting supportive and gender equal environment. And within this particular strategy, that means that we're working with religious leaders, influencers within communities, traditional leaders, young girls themselves, women's groups, to look at how is it that we can be able to create a more gender equal environment for girls like Sahada and many others out there. We're also strengthening governance to support child marriage. And what that means specifically is to ensure that we have the necessary legislation within the countries that are most affected, and not only having the legislation, but implementing the legislation to ensure that we protect girls from finding themselves in these type of situations, or even support them if they do find themselves, in a context of child marriage. We're also working very hard to ensure sustainability and impact of child marriage programs. And that includes, ensuring that families are supported, for example, in terms of income generation activities, so that the drivers as to why families make these decisions, are taken away. And finally, a key strategy for us, of course, is building partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, I talked about a number of 650 million. There is no way that one organization, one institution can be able to deal with that kind of caseload. And so it'll really require significant partnerships, with partners like Zonta, like academia, like the media, many others out there to be able to address the issue of child marriage. For us within UNICEF and within the UN family more broadly, our work is guided by the strong global commitment to end child marriage. We know about the Sustainable Development Goal under Goal 5. This is particularly focused around gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. We're also working within the context of the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, the Universal Declaration, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The purpose of this slide is to show that as a global community, there is no doubt about how committed we all should be in terms of elimination of child marriage. All of these are pieces of global policy which is in place, repeating over and over again that child marriage should not be. I hope that this beginning presentation has given you some insights into child marriage. I'll be back to talk about specifically the global program, but my intent now was to just ensure that you get a glimpse into child marriage. You see why it's important for us to have invested and to continue to invest as we go forward. I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your words this morning, which have been so informative and inspirational. And I know that we are all recommitted to the goal of ending child marriage. So thank you. And at this time, we're going to have a Q&A with Nankali. So we're going to ask you to please put your questions in the WOVA app under Q&A for this session, or to please proceed to the procedural mic where we will entertain your questions. So we'll take a few seconds for you to pull out your mobile devices, find the WOVA app and today's session to enter your questions. Okay, there's someone at the procedural mic. Please state your name.
Hello, Sonja Hartmann, Zonta Club Darmstadt. My question is, we have a very strong group in Germany to fight to end child marriage. Our problem is to implement into the clubs that we lack data for the German and European part, and how many child marriages are in the area, in the club areas, and so on. So we are thinking about making our own study, but the problem is that we don't have the right access to imams or the groups where things like child marriage can occur. So how would you suggest we could go forward to collect data about the numbers, about the actual numbers of child marriage in Europe or in Germany specifically?
Can I respond?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that data. I mean, for that question. I think there's been a continued challenge in terms of being able to get data in countries that are perceived to have low rates of child marriage. And so I just want to share with you that we've had, certainly within UNICEF, a lot of questions around data for child marriage in Europe. So it's not a new question, it's a challenge for us. And it's something that we're going to work on and be able to release either by the end of this year or early next year. What I can already tell you, though, if you are able to access, census data, we in most countries within Europe, and you have standard census questions, there is a question about the age of marriage in each household. And so if you're able to access that data, that's what we'll be using to be able to extract that. It'll be able to give you a sense of the numbers either within your region or country in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Nankali, for that response. We have a question from the WOVA app. Hello. How did you bring about legislative change in the USA, and does Zonta International play a role?
Thank you so much. So I know that UNICEF US specifically was working or has continued to work with Zonta in terms of advocating for legislation change within the US. It has not been within the context of the global program, but it's something that we share a lot of evidence and advice as to what has happened in other countries globally, because actually many other countries, have been affected and already have legislation. So what we've done in the context of the global program is to share pieces of legislation from other parts of the world and share the information of how that legislation came to be for the US context.
Excellent, thank you. There's a question at the procedural mic.
Louise Svensson, Copenhagen Free District 13. I have a few questions for you. One of them is, I wonder what you do about the Latin America, since the line were like flat and there was a lot of increase in population there. I wonder as well, what do you do to support once they are actually getting into these marriages and gave birth to children? That wasn't clear to me. And my third question, if I may, is how exactly do you make sure to get as much of the money to the beneficiaries and make sure they don't drown in all these practical, logistical, and administrative things? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Colin.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. One of the things that we've been doing, within the context of the global program is to be able to get a better understanding as to what it is that drives child marriage in different regions. I must share with you, honestly, initially we used to behave like the world is the same and child marriage is being driven by the same factors. As we've been implementing the global program and as we've been studying and trying to understand the different contexts, we're getting a better and better understanding as to what is it that's driving, child marriage in different contexts. There are certain things that are the same, regardless of where you are in the world. And there are certain things that are, have a higher risk than others. So for example, we know that education is key. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. We need to be able to get all girls into school, and we need them for them to be able to complete all the way through to secondary, and if they can, tertiary education as well. In the context of LACRO or Latin America, we're trying to get a better understanding of what is it that's driving. If there's anybody who's in this room, you'll understand that one of the things that's going on in Latin America is the issue of migration. There's a lot of movement of populations throughout that region. And that movement means that a lot of girls are, not staying within the context of families. We have a lot of children who are moving by themselves. And we know for adolescent girls who are outside of parental care, that makes them particularly vulnerable. We also know that within that region, there's very high rates of teenage pregnancy. And again, that's a huge driver in terms of child marriage, though in their context, they don't actually get into marriages. What we have within that context is unions. Young people or young girls just decide to stay with somebody once they're pregnant. And so one of the things for us is to understand more and more what is it that's driving child marriage within that region? And once we have that understanding, to be able to design programs to respond to that. And so for us, we've got a sense now that it's about migration, it's about teenage pregnancy, and we're starting to think about how to be able to design programs for that. In terms of married girls, you're absolutely right. A lot of people, when they look at child marriage programs, do say that there is definitely a bias in the way that we program towards girls who are at risk of marriage. And that's probably because it's in many instances much easier to deal with adolescent girls before they've been married. A huge intervention that we're doing for them is, let's ensure that they all get into school. Let's ensure that they can be able to access sexual reproductive health rights. Let's deal with poverty that's driving, child marriage within their families. But once a girl is married, and then to make the situation even worse, in many countries, you'll find that she's coming from a poor household, from a rural area, so she tends to be hard to reach. And if we're making a case about reaching the most vulnerable girls, this one is particularly vulnerable because she's pulled away from all services. And so for those girls, we're trying to do as much to the extent possible outreach programs. This kind of girl will not be in school. So what kind of, education system can we be able to have to reach girls who are married, who are pregnant, who are living in a rural area? 3 or 4 years ago, we went to a mission in Nepal, and it was way up in the mountains that some of these girls were residing. There's a problem of schools in general, let alone, one that can be able to reach out to married girls. How do we ensure that they can be able, even after they have their children, come back into the education system? How do we ensure that services like access to sexual reproductive health services, which you tend to have in a health center, stop just being in that block of the health center, but actually have workers that go out to reach out to these girls and can be able to engage with them, can be able to talk to them. We also know that adolescent girls who are married are vulnerable to violence as well. And how much more vulnerable can a young girl be at 16 who's married and is facing domestic violence? Again, we also look at how to be able to support social workers so they can reach out into these households, reach out to those girls, be able to engage with them, to talk to them, to tell them where the services are, and to make better linkages. So there's a number of things that we are doing because we recognize the particular vulnerability of these girls. But first and foremost, I'd say a lot of the work that we've done has been, ensuring that we have policies in place so that pregnant girls can be able to go back to school, and even after she's had her baby, to be able to also, stay on in school, have income generation activities, etc. So I hope that gives you a sense of the kind of support that we do for married girls. Thank you. The last question you raised is about resources to community, I guess to like community-based organizations. One of the things that we do in the context of the global program, and certainly for the UN as a family in general, is to ensure that we are able to pre-assess many of the organizations that we're working with. First of all, we look at the risk rating. How much resources are we actually going to release onto these community-based organizations? And as we do that, if the resource allocation is not that high, then we lower, those administrative processes. We're very, very conscious of the weight of administrative processes on these type of organizations. Many of them are unable to fill proposals. Many of them are able and unable to meet, the kind of financial procedures that we want to be able to put into place. And so we do assessments, pre-starting any of these programs to be able to determine who can go through that. What kind of thresholds do we need to be able to put into place so that, they can also be able to participate? One thing that I do want to quickly be able to share that, especially during the situation of COVID, where many governments, were unable to provide the services that they normally would, community-based organizations, women-led organizations at community level were at the forefront of providing support. If we didn't, soften our procedures in terms of getting resources to them as quickly as possible, we wouldn't have the level of protection that we had for these girls during the COVID pandemic. So yes, we're doing everything we can.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And Namkali, from the WOVA app, there's a question from Zonjans in Ghana who would like to know if the Zonta clubs in Ghana have been utilized in the child marriage program in Ghana. And if not, how can they be? Okay, all right. My honest response is I'm not sure if the Zonta clubs in Ghana have been utilized in the context of the global program. But since we started the partnership, we've always been very open, and within my role as coordinator, we've encouraged the UNICEF and UNFPA offices to be able to be open to partner with the local Zonta offices. So what I would ask, if that partnership is not in place, is, first of all, I will be around all of today and into the evening. So please feel free to walk up to me. Let's get to know each other, and I can be able to make those linkages, at any time, so that Zonta family can be able to link in with the programs, not only in Ghana, but in any of the countries. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And there is a question at the procedural mic.
My name is Shide Pourzahed. I am delegate from Frederiksberg, Copenhagen, District 13. I want to ask you and include one particular country to that project, namely Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, it's not only the child get married at age 7, 8, 9. That's different ages between husband and the bride is 50 years. And they are not the only wife. They can be wife number 4. I am asking you, they have no voice. Can we bear their voice? Thank you.
Thank you so much for making that case for Afghanistan. One of the things that I said earlier on is about us getting a better understanding of how child marriage is manifesting itself, across the world. During the first quarter of this year, I had the opportunity to be part of a team that was assessing child marriage, especially within the context of Afghanistan. And I can share with you that it was heartbreaking for me. We see such great vulnerability within the context of Afghanistan. And as you quite rightly mentioned, girls, even at birth, already committed to marriages to men, 50 and over years older than them. I don't think the situation could get any worse. And so I just want to tell you, perhaps not in the context of global program, but for UNICEF, this is an area of key attention for us. Some of the things that we're doing within that context, as we try and understand, what is it that's driving this? And we see, poverty being very, very much at the core. And I know many of you might have seen in the local media that over the past 2 or 3 days, they also had an earthquake as well take place. So the situation is becoming even worse, as the days go by. One of the things that we're doing is to advocate with, the government in place to be able to get girls back into school. I'm sure you're aware, if you're from Afghanistan, that one of the things that the Taliban government did is to put, a hold on girls going back to school. And so we continue to advocate strongly that girls can be able to go back into school, to have female teachers, to have spaces that, they can go in by themselves. We also continue to support, to advocate and actually supporting, addressing poverty reduction. And so we have, cash transfer programs that are going to particularly poor households who feel or who have pressure that, that puts them into a place where they adopt these negative coping, mechanisms of, committing children as they're born, towards marriage. We've seen that poverty is one of the things that's driving that. And so we are working in terms of, supporting those families to alleviate poverty as it goes forward. Finally, Afghanistan, even before the crisis, we know that there is a norm within Afghanistan in terms of, child marriage. It's in the culture, it's in the traditions of the country. And so we continue to look at how we can be able to work with influencers in the community. And again, like many other places, it's women who are at the forefront, women who are the activists, women who are the speakers, of what it is that's going on in terms of adolescent girls within their communities. And so we're trying to the extent possible to work with women-led organizations to ensure that we can support as much as possible adolescent girls in that community. Thank you.
Thank you. Nankali, there is a question in the WOVA app. What is the reason for the success in South Asia, and how can we transfer that to other regions of the world?
Oh man, South Asia. I don't know. Are there people in the room from South Asia?
Raise your hands. Don't be shy. If you're from South Asia, raise your hands. Let Nankali
I just
know
want to
that
say
you're here.
congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, for me, and I don't come from South Asia. I just read and study it and visit it a lot. So I'm just sharing my experiences. I know that other people, who are from South Asia can definitely talk a lot more, on the topic. My take is, first of all, is the political will, the level of commitment to be able to address, and not just the issue of child marriage, but to address gender equality. I see such high level of commitment, and it doesn't start from when you're an adolescent girl, but it starts from when girls are born. So there's an investment in women as they're pregnant. There's an investment in children and babies as they're growing up to ensure that they have the right nutrition. There's an investment in adolescent girls to ensure that they go into school, from primary school to secondary school. But even beyond that, they're looking at what opportunities there are for young girls. In many of the countries that we're working in, when we talk about education, many of the parents say, okay, so my daughter went to school and she completed secondary school or she completed tertiary education, but then what? There's no opportunities for young people to get jobs, to be productive citizens. And so a lot of the time when we're talking about education and, we push it until secondary and then we leave it as it is. In some of the countries we're working, a perfect example is Bangladesh. Many of the families have said, okay, so you've delayed our daughter from getting married. And because when she was younger, there was a higher chance of them getting a higher dowry. She's completed secondary school. And then she's just sitting at home. And we're all sitting here looking at each other. What does that mean for this girl in terms of opportunities for her life? What does it mean for us as a family? And so these are the reflections that we're having to do. And for me, this is what I see about South Asia. It's that continued investment all the way from when a woman is pregnant, when she has her baby, when the adolescent girl is growing up, all the way through until she has a job and she has something to be able to make out of her life. It's a long-term investment, and it's a commitment that you put over a long period of time. That kind of commitment, we're really looking forward and hoping that many other governments in the world will also make those type of investments.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now take a question from the procedural mic.
Thank you. My name is Carmen Nerding. I'm coming from the Zonta Club in Karlsruhe, Germany. Thank you very much for this presentation. And you show us the goal for 2030. And I decided that it isn't possible to raise this goal. How do you think we as Zontian in person and also as an organization are able to be a part of this raising goal to get more project in the world for the ending child marriage?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. You know, a lot of us feel kind of intimidated and worried. We're now, what is it, 7 to 8 years to 2030? And many people might feel, you know, are we really going to be able to achieve this goal? We've just talked about South Asia. If there is the right commitment, if there is the right partnerships, if there is, the resources that are put behind this, I think it's possible. And the story that I hope that I put forward in my presentation is that the work that we're doing is actually leading, there is success behind that. We are reducing as a global community the rates of child marriage. The issue that we're facing, of course, is that as we're getting towards 2030, many other things are coming towards us. So, COVID, conflict, climate change are all kind of, hitting at us. And maybe that will be reversing some of the gains that we have made. But irregardless of that, I think we should remain steadfast. I think we should remain focused. I think out of all the issues that I've worked on, and I've worked in quite a number within the space of child protection, I've never seen the kind of global commitment that we have on an issue like child marriage. And it's not just in Zonta, it's, globally, everywhere that you go, it seems to me almost clear for all that that everybody agrees that this is not how we want adolescent girls to live their lives. This is not how we want women to be, as they come up within society. So as you reflect, as the Zonta family, for me, of course, I have my bias. Investment into the global program, I think, is particularly important. But beyond investment within the global program, around our communities is just being consistently aware about what is the situation of adolescent girls, ensuring that they can be able to access the necessary services that are required to be able to prevent them from getting into these type of situations. School. I can't emphasize that more. But not just being able to get them through education, but we've just talked about opportunities post-education so that them going through that education actually pays off at the end of the day. Access to services, again, for me, that's really clear, really important. And the more that we can be able to advocate for that, the better. We need services that are girl-friendly. We need girls in our communities to be able to walk in comfortably into, a health service, any of the services around us, and feel welcome and feel that they can be able to access and really actually access them. We know that girls, and particularly girls who are coming from vulnerable opportunities, I really want to be able to highlight that. There's girls all around us, but there's girls who are from poor households. There's girls who are from migrant populations. There's girls who are living in rural areas. Those ones will never have the voice, the confidence, the access to the services that we have around us. So the more that we can have, people like the Zonta family speaking up for them, ensuring that they can be able to access these services, the better as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanda. Nankali, we have a two-part question from Loba. Sahada was pregnant and going to school. She now has a baby. How does she cope taking care of her baby? And is she married to the father of her baby?
Yeah, okay. We were really, really honored for Sahada to be able to join us and be able to share about her life. I must share with you that when I found out that Sahada had been pregnant and that she'd had a baby and that she was living with the baby, I was very conscious about whether she can come in front of such a huge group of people and be able to talk about her life. If I think I wouldn't have been out, I'd probably want to shy away from everyone and not be able to share that part of my life. But she came on and she talked about it, and and she's empowered and she's out there. And for me, that's what we want. Somebody has already asked about, the situation of married girls or girls who have gotten pregnant. This is what we have to do, for their lives. Sahada is not married. She's just had a baby. Through the program that we've supported through the Global Programme in Ghana, she has been able, to go back to school. So Ghana as a country has a policy which allows girls who've been pregnant to go back to school. The program is able to provide care services. And so she's able to leave the baby at a care point and go to school and come back. Sahada also has, a peer network of other girls who've also had babies as well. So they're able to connect with each other, communicate with each other. And again, through the program, Sahada is also able to access, other services, whether it's sexual reproductive health services, economic strengthening services. And it's not just about Sahada, but about the family that Sahada comes from and the community that she comes from as well. So the program not only looks at how can we ensure that Sahada grows up to be a productive human being, but also to look at her family. Sahada is very fortunate to come from a very supportive family, but they needed the extra support as well, because that for them is also an extra mouth to feed, extra support to be provided. And through the global program, we've been able to get her to where she is today. And I'm really proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now take the question at the procedural mic.
Thank you for taking my question. The name is Maria Odumodu from the Zonta Club of Woodstock, Ontario, District 4 delegate. Today you talked about child marriage. I just want to talk about the importance of education to the prevention of child marriage, to population control, to economic growth, and even to the improvement of the whole community if you can just train one girl. But I'm going to look at it from the point of North-South. Say in the North, education is provided by the government. Then there's no school fees. There's no uniform. If you want a uniform, you buy your uniform. You don't have to pay for books. In the South, the governments do not provide school, free education. So families have to pay for them. And then you have the International Monetary Fund in it, which says you cannot provide education free because that is good socialism. I'd like you to talk about how we can deal with or how we can influence the International Monetary Fund so that the governments in the South can actually provide education free so that those girls will go to school and is not left to their parents. As you have correctly noted, some of the parents are poor. And there are some poor parents in the North, but the children also go to school because it's free. They don't have to pay for school fees, no books. So is it possible for you to please just address that? And what can we do with the local governments or the national governments to convince them of the importance? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. I don't have an expertise of working with the IMF, but I'm very clear about what it is that you're saying. One, it's very clear in my mind about the importance of education and what that means, not only for the girl, but also for the community and the country that she's coming from. I agree with you that it's important to have these investments and just to share with you, I think as Pamela was introducing me, she shared that I'm from Tanzania. I have the opportunity to be able to work in New York, and during COVID, I was watching, I saw a number of kids in New York, drop out of school. And then I was able to see, computers being bought and being delivered to some children. I saw, online courses for Zoom, all kinds of technology being used to be able to apply to ensure that children were still able to be educated. And even with those efforts, of course, there were still a number of challenges that were in place. For me, coming from Tanzania, it was like an out-of-body experience. I was like, what? Governments can bring resources around together in that type of way and be able to reach out to vulnerable children and ensure that they have the equipment and the technology and the teachers who can still be able to reach them. It was out of body, but it was also an amazing experience for me, and something which I could only wish, for many of the children from the country that I come from. I know what it has meant for those children. I know what it could mean for the children within the country that I come from. And I see a lot of, increased investment around issues of education. And I think that should go on. And whether it's the IMF or whoever it is who can be able to enable that, it should continue. And I'm really glad that people within Zonta are raising that. And I think, with your chapters in country, we should continue to advocate and to push, for this area. And especially, we need to get all children back into school. But just to say, from my perspective, there's a particular vulnerability around girls. Both boys and girls are out of school, but we know when schools open up, boys will go back into school. Many girls will never go back into school. They'll end up married, they'll end up taking care of the elderly carers in their houses, etc. So the more that we can all come together to be able to make a case for these type of investments, the better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. There's a question in the WOVA app. Please let us know if there are programs to educate the boys as well as the men and fathers.
Right. One of the key strategies that we have within the context of the global program, and it's not just for the global program, but many other programs. Of course, we talk about ending child marriage, but the greater objective is achieving gender equality. And to do that, one of the key strategies is engagement with men and boys. For a long time, many of these programs, girls that are focused on girls, that are focused on women, have tended to just focus on girls and women by themselves. But increasingly, we recognize the role that men and boys actually do play in terms of addressing gender equality. And so you'll see, and I hope many of the members will be seeing the next annual report that will be coming out, where you'll see the expanded approach that we have in all the countries that we're working for the global program in terms of engaging with men and boys, at community level. One, we recognize, especially for men, the influencing power that they have within their families. They're the ones who are making decisions about, how much, whether girls should go into school or not in their families. They're the ones in many instances who are the income earners and are making decisions about how those funds should be used at household level. Et cetera, et cetera. And so there's been a lot of engagement and will continue to be with men and boys, just recognizing the role that they have, not only, the broader objective of addressing gender equality, but even more specifically in terms of ending child marriage as well. They're also, they're the traditional leaders, they're the religious leaders. They're the ones who are making many of these decisions that we're trying to stop from taking place. And so increasingly we will work with them. And many of them today stand as champions, on this. And so we hail those who are standing as champions, and we want them to do even more and be great examples for other men and boys in their community.
Absolutely. Thank you. We now have time for two final questions. There will be one from the floor and one from WOVA. So at this time, the procedural mic.
Hi, Ela Pendia, District 9, Zonta Club of Porterville. I think whatever questions I had have already been answered, but since I was here, I want to take the opportunity to share two facts. One is about Asia. Indian government has started a campaign called, in Indian, it's called Ladki Bachao, Ladki Padhao, which means save the girl child, educate the girl child, which I think has been very successful. And as far as my Zonta sisters in the USA, since USA was not a part of the 12-country program, I want you all to know that Zonta USA caucus was formed about 4 or 5 years ago. And the caucus has taken on child marriage as a project. And please go to zontausa.org and you will see that when we started, there were only 2 states that had laws against child marriage. We are now at 6. And I believe caucus will continue to work to get all the 50 states pass 18 no exception laws. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if that served as a question. So let's take another question from the procedural mic.
My name is Lydia Chailloux. I am a member of the Zonta International UN Committee. Well, we are in UNESCO Paris. We are currently preparing the International Child Girls Day in 11th of October. And this event could take place in Morocco or in Paris. My question is, could you provide us short videos about young girls sharing their experience and what they got from UNICEF and from the Zonta International Foundation for Women, and to speak about their issues, especially after this pandemic, not only pregnancy, but all their issues. And many NGOs are speaking during those events, but we would like to put forward the voice of Zonta International. So we really need short videos about young girls and young child. Thank you.
Lydia, before Nankali responds, I thank you for that question. And let's talk, because I think that there are ways for us to be able to work together on that. Okay, Nankali?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm part of a committee that's actually working on the theme for Day of the Girl. And so the theme, by the way, will be coming out shortly for all of us to be able to align to it and to respond to it. And have no doubt that I'll be strongly advocating for issues related to child marriage around that theme. Videos, yes, absolutely. Through Megan, we'll certainly be able to share videos for you to be able to access. But beyond the video, just to say that, increasingly we're seeing young girls, as being so much more empowered, who are talking so well, so eloquently. So to the extent possible, please not only consider the video, but we have lots of girls in this program, that's supported by Zonta, who can come and talk by themselves about their own life experiences to you. I think there's nothing better than the girls talking themselves, just to advocate back at you.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. And Nankali, I'm sure that you're going to have Zontians from around the world who are going to take you up on that. So thank you. And the last question is from Wova. We know that the governments are mostly male dominated. So is it actually hard to put through the program in certain countries, or are the governments cooperative? How was the development in the last years?
The program, we shared the slide where we were showing, the difference in many of the regions of the world over 30 years. And there's some where you can see, significant progress, and many where you don't see significant progress. And the places where you're not seeing progress just, is a reflection of the commitment and buy-in of those member states and the community at large. So it's a challenge. The global program, we launched it in 2016, and we designed it as a 15-year program. We said 15 years because in our mind, that's how long it would take. You can see that in many of the regions, even over 30 years, not much has changed. So the thinking, what drives child marriage, the continuous challenges that are coming at community, continue to be there. The good news is that, we are making progress. We want to be able to make even faster progress. The good news about where we are today is that there's global commitment, there's member states, there's partnerships like yourselves who are, all hands in, which is very different from where we were, 30 years ago. And all of that is really positive. For me, it reflects a movement, it reflects a force of what we could possibly do. The challenge now is that, we have this last 7 to 8 years. How do we do more faster? Speak up a lot more, invest to the extent that we can so that we can really be able to achieve that elimination goal. So yes, lots of challenges out there, and I'll be talking about some of those in the next presentation. But if there's ever a time that we've ever had so many people's hands linked around an issue, this is it. And so, we can do it. This is the time.
Fantastic. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namtali, on behalf of Zonta International and in recognition of your tremendous efforts to end child marriage, our president, Susan, would like to make a presentation. Oh, Sharon, I'm sorry.
Get from over here. Thank you again, Nankali. We are so proud of our work with UNICEF and UNFPA to end child marriage. Programs like the Global Program to End Child Marriage are a testament to the power of partnerships. Zonta International is proud of its partnerships, which have made great strides for women and girls and helped bring lasting, sustainable changes in countries and communities across the globe. This year, Zonta International celebrates 50 years of partnership with UNICEF. I hope you have had a chance to see the displays in the back of the entry hall foyer. If you haven't, I encourage you to do so and to see just how much we have achieved together. In recognition of this major milestone, UNICEF USA has put together a video to celebrate our 50 years of partnership. Enjoy.
"50 years ago, when Zonta International began its partnership with UNICEF USA, the world was a very different place for women and girls. In the United States, the women's rights movement was in full swing. The Equal Rights Amendment had just passed both houses of Congress, and leaders of feminism's second wave were making their voices heard. Around the world, however, women's voices were often less audible. Women in Switzerland had only just earned the right to vote. Globally, 543 million women were illiterate, and women in Asia and Africa regularly worked 13 more hours a week than men. Denied their basic rights in many regions of the world, women and girls faced enormous challenges to their health and well-being. The average life expectancy for a woman was 60. Child marriage was much more common, and access to birth control much more limited. For Zonta members, concern for the welfare and rights of women and girls around the world has always been part of their DNA. But it wasn't until 1972 at Zonta's convention that the organization issued a formal resolution to incorporate global service. Every Zonta club has the responsibility to support, through both monetary contributions and personal service, projects to its own community, but also Zonta International service projects directed toward the world community. That same year, Zonta and UNICEF USA launched their first project together, mobile medical units to serve the health needs of children and mothers in hard-to-reach areas of Ghana. It would be the first of many projects for the partnership.
There are so many wonderful examples of the positive impacts of the partnership between Zonta International and UNICEF USA starting in 1972. More recently in Afghanistan, about 4 million women of childbearing age were targeted for tetanus vaccination. In 2003, Zonta International helped to support 4 cities and 8 rural districts in Kabul province. And then from 2008 to 2016, Zonta and UNICEF's partnership in Rwanda helped to contribute to a nation free of AIDS and new HIV infection among children, adolescents, women, and families.
Over decades, Zonta's contribution has led to thousands of saved and improved lives in countries like Burkina Faso, Afghanistan, Nepal. Together, these 2 storied organizations have helped girls access an education in Madagascar, helped combat child marriage around the world, and created the Well Water Project in Sri Lanka that spurred the creation of the Zonta International Foundation, now the Zonta Foundation for Women. Most recently, Zonta and UNICEF USA's partnership has reached across the mountains of Peru to address the needs of indigenous and rural adolescents, helping them avoid childhood pregnancies and grow in an environment supported by social-emotional learning and safe from violence.
Some of the greatest progress has come from simply including girls in the conversation and ensuring their participation in decision-making. At UNICEF, we're ramping up our partnerships with women and girls networks to do more of exactly that, listening, bringing girls to investment roundtables, and creating spaces for their ideas and voices. Our next steps must include asking girls when we design programs for them and with them, will this make a difference? How can we improve? And when we're implementing those programs, were you satisfied with our support? What needs to happen next?
So, what's next for Zonta and UNICEF USA?
With a track record of success for over 50 years, we're poised to make an even bigger impact together, building brighter, safer, and healthier futures for girls and women, investing in country-specific programs with proven and measurable impact. UNICEF USA is extremely grateful to have Zonta as a valued partner, especially as new global challenges make maintaining progress for girls and women harder. With Zonta's continued help, UNICEF won't stop working to help make the more than 1.1 billion girls under the age of 18 become all they are meant to be. The largest generation of female leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers the world has ever seen.
Thank you again to our colleagues at UNICEF USA for producing this video, and for us to thank you for our 50 years of collaboration. And I got to attend one of the 50-year celebrations that were occurring in different parts of the United States, and I attended the one in Los Angeles. And it was just superb to see what has been going on for the last 50 years. So again, thank you. I have a couple of announcements before we have a break. Our Zonta store is still open. You can still go shopping. It will be open until I believe 1:30 or 2, somewhere in there. I don't have the exact time, so this break and at lunchtime. And don't forget our foundation booth as you walk out. I'm seeing more and more stickers. We want to fill those boards. So those are 2 things that you can do during break and lunch. We'll now take you actually get 35 minutes, but be prompt because we have a full agenda for the next section. So please be back here and ready to go right at 11 o'clock. So enjoy your break.